Welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, your go-to podcast for expert advice, market insights, and real-life stories to help you buy your first home with confidence.
Hello and welcome to the First Property Buyer Show, the podcast that is with you every step of the way during your property journey. I'm Emilie Lauer, journalist here at Momentum Media, and today we are joined by Jacob Smith, who will share his property journey from using the first home buyer schemes to the mistakes he made and the lessons he learned along the way. Jacob, thanks
Emily.
for joining us.
No worries.
Well, Jacob, I want to say congratulations first because you just bought your first property.
Yeah, 2 months ago.
So 2 months ago, you bought your first property. You've been living in it for about 2 months?
About 2 months, yeah.
How is the homeowner life treating you?
Oh, it's so much better because I rented for the last kind of 7 years or so, and I would move every single year. I've lived in about 7 residences in the last 7 years. Constantly getting up and moving just to avoid that kind of rent hike that almost occurred at every single place that I stayed at. It's a nightmare, you know? And so getting into a property that I owned and could do whatever I wanted with it and didn't have to answer to a landlord or anyone was quite frankly, for the past 7 years, was a pipe dream.
Yeah.
Something that I genuinely dreamt about. And just the idea of being able to hammer a nail in a wall to hang up a frame without having to ask about
now,
it.
yeah.
I can do it. It's great.
Fantastic. Well, that's going to push me to my next question. We've got a lot of people that are going through the rentvesting route. You went through the owner-occupier route.
Yes.
Was that something you had decided from the get-go, like those years before, or did you still hesitate to go into the rentvesting, which is renting where you live and investing in another place?
Yeah. So I bought the current place with my fiancée and we discussed it prior. I floated the idea of rentvesting because for the viewers who don't know, I do work at Momentum Media. Normally, I'm behind the soundboard, the camera, sorting things out. And so I listen into SBI and First Property Buyer Show and quite frequently, against my will. But that information kind of seeps into your mind. And so I raised it with my fiancée, and she grew up always having that vision of living in the first home that she bought. I wasn't against that, because I had a very similar image. And it was only recently that I started thinking, maybe rentvesting would be the better way to go.
By listening to SPI.
Yes. And we discussed about it, and we kind of just thought, well, if we put in the right research on what it is we want for our future on that property, then we can make it work without going through the rentvesting route. To do that, we decided, well, the place that we buy, we know we want to own forever. We won't sell it. So it needs to be a place with high rental yield and high growth in rental returns in the long term. We looked at the fact that immigration into Australia was increasing a lot. We looked into places near the airport, along train routes that were easy to get to Sydney and various other working areas that are CBD related. And we settled on kind of Wolli Creek, Arncliffe area. Even though the capital growth in that area isn't huge, the rental returns are pretty crazy. It's on average over 5%.
Yeah, and look, I think, capital growth is something that is quite cyclic here in Australia, especially in Sydney. It's, goes up and down. So, you're not going to sell anytime soon. You just bought. So who knows in 5 to 10 years where the capital gain is going to be at.
Exactly. No one can really nail it down and be like, this is definitely going to happen. It's all speculation at the end of the day. You can make educated guesses.
Yeah, and look, like some of our guests on the show say, nobody has a crystal ball. So you never know exactly for sure 100% what's going to happen. And you would be surprised. But I agree with you on the fact that rentvesting has become more popular. But it's definitely something that is a question of how you've been raised and what's in your I don't want to say value because that's the wrong word, but how you see your first investment property. We're also looking for our first home, and that's going to be an owner-occupier because it doesn't make sense for us to continue to pay rent. But again, it depends on people and what they want for their own portfolio. Right, you touched a little bit upon that first property that you got in Wolli Creek. Tell us more about this. Give us the spec. Okay. What do you like the most about your first property?
So the convenience and location of where it is just the best. I think Wolli Creek is heavily slept on. It's predominantly an Asian culture area, and I know a lot of Australians kind of shy away from areas like that. And so property prices in those kind of high density areas are on the lower side and historically don't have a lot of capital growth. And so I think for typical investors and people who are buying their first homes, they don't really look at those areas. They kind of think, over immigrants and overseas buyers are probably more interested in those areas because that's where the culture hubs are. And Katie and I, my fiancée is named Katie. Katie and I, we didn't really care so much about that. We just wanted to look at the big picture and think what's important to us? We wanted easy public transport, easy to access, amenities. Wolli Creek itself is, we live specifically in Discovery Point, which is right next to Wolli Creek train station. There's a train every 3 minutes into the city. There's a transfer in Sydenham to the metro station to get up to North Sydney. There's the train line to the airport for domestic and international. And there's a Woolworths and Aldi that's about a 2-minute walk away from our front door. There's 3 medical centres, a pharmacy, and just a full restaurant district underneath. And there's a river, water walkways, lovely parks, and I just feel like it's a slept-on area. And so when we kind of walked around it, before we decided this is where we want to buy, we had really low expectations for it because we hadn't heard anything about Wolli Creek being mentioned. I hadn't heard Wolli Creek get mentioned on the SBI show or First Property Buyer show at all. And so it was very much a risk in that space because it wasn't talked about. But the more we looked into it, we just thought, you know what, even if it doesn't do well for us in the long term financially, the livability of the place is just incredible. And so that's how we just kind of thought, we've got to get something in this area.
And I think, that is, look, if it's not talked about, maybe it's because it's a hidden gem. We never know. And look, at the end of the day, you will be living in that place for the next, 5 to 10 years, maybe? We're
thinking 10 years.
Here we go. So you need to have that, capacity, livelihood around. Exactly. Makes your life easy.
It does.
So 10 years, that's your timeline.
Yeah, we think if we're strict, if we account for, pay rises over time, we reckon we can pay the place off in about 10 years and outright own it. When that occurs, we estimate, if the trends continue, we estimate rental return on our place could be about $1,200 a week.
Pretty good.
At the 10-year mark, which, in today's currency, that's full-time wage income. That'd be good. That'd be good.
It's a good investment for retirement down the road. Yeah.
It is. And that's why we decided to go this route.
So 10 years, that's the goal, to pay off that mortgage.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm assuming you took a mortgage over 30 years?
Yeah.
How are you going to get that down to the 10 years mark?
So we've got an offset account.
Yeah.
And we bought at the height of the interest rates. And there's been 3 cuts. Well, actually 2 cuts since we purchased. There was 1 cut just before we purchased. But we bought at a time where the prices of property were being held back by the high interest rates. And so in the last 2 months since we bought and the rate cuts have happened, buyers have already started flooding the market. And I've actually already seen a bit of a capital growth return on property estimate websites. on the value estimate websites. And
you're estimating to pay back your mortgage in 10 years. I'm assuming you took a 30-year mortgage. How are you going to do that?
a lot of basically any extra cash is going in an offset account. And then when that offset account equals the principal total repayment, we're just going to pay it off in one lump sum using that offset. And then, we'll be back to square one cash flow wise, but we'll outright own our property, and any income after that can go straight into savings, stocks, saving up for a new property. We can even use the equity in the property that we own.
Yeah, and just buy more. Now let's go a little bit back on time about when you started looking for that first property. So how long did it take you? What were some of the challenges? Just take us through the process.
There were countless challenges, absolutely countless challenges that we faced. It is very daunting when you're a first property buyer, and I don't think it's talked about enough how hard it is to get correct information. And people say go to your broker. And we went to a few brokers, and everyone would say different things, give us different information, and it was just convoluted. And we at one point we just got frustrated, and we just thought what's the point of even going through this journey if it's just going to be this difficult? And I think what is seriously lacking out there is just a website that just genuinely takes you through step by step on how you go about purchasing a home, what steps are actually involved. It's just it's not done.
I'm sorry. We've got the first property buyer show.
Yes.
It's coming. It is there. We get you guys step by step onto how to get through that journey, brokers included.
Yes.
And experience.
I will say that when we started our property journey, first property buyer show was still on its younger.
Yeah. So, how long ago was that?
How long did it take you? We started the idea of buying property probably about 5 months ago.
Okay.
We knew we had some savings, but at the time, I actually didn't have a job. I was between jobs. This is before I started working here. And we kind of investigated the idea of, what if my fiancée gets set out a loan in her name, and then I just contribute towards the repayments. But the bank came back and they said, sorry, you can only borrow $450,000 because she has $60,000 in HEX debt.
Yeah.
Which is pretty typical these days for a lot of uni degrees.
Yeah.
It's so we were told, any debts you have, the bank times that by 3 and then takes that off the amount you're allowed to borrow. And so when we saw that, okay, so she would have been eligible for a $650,000 loan, but because of the HEX debt, it plummeted down to 400 and something.
So you really needed a job, yeah?
Yeah. But the problem is so many banks need you to be in the job off the probation period or have been working there for a minimum of 3 months and have proven paycheck history. Thankfully though, Commonwealth Bank doesn't actually care about that. All they need to see is a contract. So if you've been out of work for a little bit and you just get a job and you can prove hey, here's my contract, here's the income I'm going to earn, they're a lot more flexible than other banks are.
Interesting.
Yeah. So that helped when we realized that. Thought, okay, you need to get a job now. We can get this ball rolling once I'm in that. And and the ball did get rolling once I settled into this position.
So how long did it take you after to get that property?
Once I got the job, started at the beginning of March, we had the keys in hand, end of June, start of July.
So quite fast.
It was very fast. And we did have a gift from my mum of about 10 grand, which helped.
Yeah, definitely.
That was actually more towards because we were engaged, it was kind of just a general gift as, you're getting married, use it towards a wedding, a house, whatever you want. Obviously, that is a privileged position that not many people can say my parents can give me 10K. But I know people who can get 100K from their parents, and it's there's a big disparity, and what matters most is as long as you can save for that initial deposit with the first-time buyer scheme, it is a lot more accessible than saving for that 20%.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people get petrified about saving for that 20% because of the capital growth in the Australian property market can sometimes outpace your ability to save for that deposit. And that's scary.
Yeah, definitely. Two things on this one. First of all, look, I know it's very challenging, the bank of mom and dads. Look, if parents can give to their kids, why not? At the end of the day, it's definitely a privilege.
It is.
But if your parents can do it, just, go for it. And let's go into that first property buyer scheme, because you went through that first buyer scheme, which is the 5% deposits and then the stamp duty exemption.
Yes.
So let's go through that. How did it work? Was it easy to get? How did that impact the properties you were looking at?
So one thing we noticed very quickly was the properties that we were looking at were in the same price range as every other first property buyer.
Yeah.
And when you're on the scheme in Sydney, you're capped out at, I think it's 900,000 at the moment, 950, something like that. But because there's a cap on the amount that you can earn, I do find that this quite strange actually, because you can earn, I think it's a maximum of 200,000 a year before tax. But you can't afford a $950,000 home if that's your income in your household. The banks look at that and they say, oh, no, you can't afford a $950,000 loan on $200,000, but that's the criteria in the first-time buyer scheme. So most people could only afford an $850,000 loan in that income bracket. So we found that even though the maximum you could borrow is $950,000, no one was actually borrowing that amount. Everyone was borrowing around $800,000. So we go on the market and it was just flooded with first-time buyers like ourselves who all had this exact same budget. And so it turned from, oh, I have like more money than you for this property, therefore I outbid you and I can get it, into more like a rental situation where you got to line out the door and the best application wins.
Oh my God.
It's hard. And so I think it's going to get even worse.
Now that the rate cuts, yeah.
With January 1st next year, I think it is, where the changes are coming in for a maximum $1.5 million borrowing power.
Yeah, and everybody will have access to those schemes now.
That's going to be an interesting time. I have no idea what the landscape's going to be like then. But if you buy up until then, expect what I just described for the first-time buyer scheme to be your experience. So
basically, if you are ready to go now before it gets crowded
I'd
even more.
highly advise it. And if you're going to see any kind of capital growth in your first property, it's going to be from January 1st onwards, I think.
So you get those 5% deposits. So you just went through the bank and be like, I want to do the first home buyer schemes, or did you have to apply?
Yeah, so we went to a broker that specialized in first property buying. We just got recommended that broker from my mother-in-law. The broker did a good job in the grand scheme of things. We were able to get a home. But even then, there were little things that we constantly had to chase up on and we didn't know about. We had to ask questions because there's just this assumption that even if you're first property buyer, it's like for some reason, people just assume that you kind of know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, that's not the case. And it was a bit weird. You'd think that someone who specialized in first property buyers and broking would know this. But we kind of had to keep chasing up and asking all these, what probably felt like dumb questions to the broker.
So what are some of those dumb questions?
Give
us the insight.
So when we were in the buying process and talking to an estate agent, we had no idea what the actual kind of step ladder was for talking to the agent, making an offer, talking to solicitors, and we didn't know what the order of operations were with all that. We didn't know if we had to go to the solicitors first and then make the offer, or make the offer and then go to the solicitors, or in terms of the actual application process for the first-time buyer scheme, it was mostly done through our broker. She provided us with a form that we needed to fill out, and it was just like a governmental form. You need to fit strict criteria, but from January 1st onwards, that would be a lot more loose.
Easier, yeah.
And we had to provide like how much we earn, what our debts are, and all that sort of stuff, similar to applying for a bank. And yeah, the government just kind of looks over it and they check it off. And there are limited places for the first-time buyer scheme as well. So I think it refreshes every year. Thankfully, we got in at a point in time when there were still slots available for the scheme. But we were approved pretty quickly. And I think that was probably very much because of our broker pushing things along.
So did you have like a price limit for your property to benefit from that first home buyer schemes and then further down the road, the stamp duty exemption scheme?
So we kind of just looked at the repayments and determined like, oh, can we afford that? If one of us to lose our jobs, can we afford it still? And that's how we kind of viewed it. And what was really interesting about our situation, we actually earn over 200,000. But at the time of application, it was before the end of the financial year. And the application requires the previous year's like income information. And so that was a period of time where I was working a different job and then I wasn't working for a bit. So on tax, I was earning significantly less than what I was earning now. And so on paper, we were earning like 150,000 a year between the two of us. To the government, they're like, oh yeah, you definitely, as a joint couple earning between 120 and 200,000, you're right in the sweet spot to be eligible for the scheme. So they approved it. But then just, a few months later, new tax year rolls around. Lo and behold, we're over the tax bracket now and we wouldn't be eligible for it anymore. So just bear that in mind that if you're looking at the criteria for the scheme and you think, oh no, we earn too much, check back the previous year.
Yeah.
Look at your tax statements for the previous year. You might find that you just squeeze in under 200,000 because you were earning less that year. You might have gotten a pay rise or a bonus that didn't occur.
It's all about timing. All about timing at the end of the day.
It is.
Talking about timing, the market is becoming busier and busier. But when you bought back in April, June, the market was already busy because we had one rate cut already.
Yes.
We are at 3 rate cuts now, which means the market is busier now. How do you navigate that type of crazy busy market? And what sets you apart from the other buyer when you went and got your property?
I'm quite proud of this, actually. So, did you know that the definition of a bedroom is a space that has a window?
Interesting.
And that meant that there were technically 2-bedroom apartments available for purchase at a cheaper price because they were listed as 1 bedroom and their second room was a study, but that study couldn't be classified as a bedroom because it didn't have a window, but it's large enough to be a bedroom. And so I went down that route. And what you find is because the space is larger in square meters, it's priced more than the average 1-bedroom home. But then you go, as soon as the place is listed as a 2-bedroom, it skyrockets up to a price point where like it becomes difficult to obtain, especially in the areas that we were looking at. Now, I kept a close eye on properties that had larger studies that could be classified as a second bedroom, like to someone who doesn't care about a window.
Yeah.
And so we were able to find a place that was more expensive than 1 bedroom, but significantly cheaper than a 2-bedroom. And it feels like a normal 2-bedroom to us because like we didn't care about a window in the second room. Like we use it as a study for ourselves. But in the future, when we have a kid and they're going to be in a cot, who cares? Like they're not going to care about a window. They're a kid. And so that's how I got around that competition. And so everyone's going on realestate.com domain and they're putting in their filters for 2 bedrooms or 1 bedrooms. And so they're all flooding those price points by the filter. But if you say if you want a 3-bedroom, just do 2-bedroom and then check that you want to study. And then you might see listings that are technically 3 bedrooms and can fit the space that you need, but aren't priced at such.
Would you be able to add a window? I'm wondering because we've been visiting a lot of places and we've visited places where you've got that kind of like 2nd bedroom in the middle of the property, but there's like a very small window-ish at the top that filters onto the other bedroom.
Yeah, so it's interesting you say that. I have not looked into that, but I thought of this a couple of days ago, and I'm wondering if I sneakily install a window inside the house to let some light into this spare room, can I then classify it as a bedroom? I don't know the answer to that.
Would you need strata approval to do that?
It's a good question, actually. I think any kind of demolition of a wall, I think you do need strata approval for. I know like I can do things like, I think I can lay floating floorboards on the floor without strata approval, but
I think you do need strata approval for that.
I think if it's floating, you're not damaging the floor underneath it.
You need the soundproofing rates.
True. Okay.
So
ignore what I'm saying, everyone.
It's a learning podcast.
It is.
It is a learning podcast.
Like I don't claim to know everything.
Nobody knows everything.
No,
we're here to learn.
Exactly.
So first home buyer scheme, stamp duty exemption scheme. So you didn't pay any stamp duty.
None at all.
So that's really lowered the cost of your first property, which is what you want, when there's, if you don't have that much means or that much deposits. And that's a lot of that situation our listeners are on. It's entering the market as fast as you can. Now, I know you've done a lot of research, and I know you are the AI king in this office. How did you manage to use AI to your advantage while doing your research and doing your due diligence?
So the one big part that frustrated us, especially with looking at apartments, is those pesky strata reports.
Oh, yeah.
We got sick to death of paying a solicitor to look through strata reports, having to pay for strata reports as well sometimes. Like that, you're going to have to pay for a lot of strata reports when you're looking for property. It sucks. It's just part of the game, unfortunately. But I thought, hang on a minute. These strata reports are PDFs that you download after buying them. Why don't I just run them through AI? But not the typical AI routes. I'm not talking you go into ChatGPT, upload the file and say, look for issues in the strata report. And you actually, there's an art to it. And you need to specifically turn on deep research, which is a feature in ChatGPT. There's also a deep research feature in Google Gemini. And I think there are other research tools out there similar to that. But what's special about deep research and Gemini's research feature is it can provide you with a 50-page plus response to any research tasks that you give it. When you typically talk to ChatGPT or Gemini, it gives you a shorter than normal response just because of the nature of the model. So if you want the nitty-gritty details on a report, just asking ChatGPT straight is not going to give you the full response that you actually need to make an informed decision on property. So where deep research came in very, very handy was its ability to trawl through a 100-page, 200-page strata report and be able to take its time reading it properly and then writing in detail about every issue it found. And multiple times we saved a lot of money doing that rather than going through a solicitor. And the good thing about AI is that it's pretty good at picking up on big obvious issues. Now, once you've found a place using AI that comes back saying, yeah, it seems pretty good, then you take it to the solicitor and get it professionally done. Because that two-step process is going to be a lot more useful and kind of
and you know a little
relieving.
Bit more what you're looking for.
Exactly. And you learn in the process too, because the solicitor kind of just comes back and says, these are the issues with it. but it doesn't really say why.
Yeah.
But the AI actually tell you why it's a problem and why you should avoid it.
So look, if I were to listen to that pod, my first question that would pop into my mind would be, what sort of prompts should I be using through ChatGPT to like read that strata report? Do you have like a couple of example, like practical example to give our listeners?
So specifically for strata reports, I'd upload the PDF and I'd say, I'm looking to purchase this property, and I'd link the realestate.com listing or domain listing. I'd also then write the exact address. I'd say it's currently listed for X price. Give me an analytical breakdown of any current issues, potential future issues, and things that could become expensive. And it'd also give me like, a pros and cons list. I want to know why this could be good despite the problems, because some people can put up with some issues if there's a lot of positives in other ways. And I found out a lot of big no-no places. Like there was a place along Gertrude Street in Wolli Creek where it's like this beautiful boutique building, incredible views. So it was the penthouse in our budget. And it was fishy. It was like, why is this in our budget?
Yeah, it's a penthouse. Shouldn't be in your budget.
It shouldn't be. As a first-time buyer,
No,
you're very
never.
lucky to get a penthouse as a first-time buyer.
It's a dream, yeah.
It is a dream. But genuinely, the views are incredible. And we were like, oh my God, if this is real, like this is genuinely a steal. Anyway.
That wasn't a steal. Nope.
Turns out the entire building had major structural issues in the garage area, in the underneath the building.
God.
And it was it'd been flooded a few times, and there was structural damage to the actual columns that hold the building up. I'm like, does this mean this thing could come down if it's not treated? And because it was a boutique building, there were only 22 units in this building, and this building was the size of a typical apartment complex, and so it was $2,500 a quarter in strata fees.
God.
And that was outside of any special levies imposed. And so we just looked at it and think, oh my God, this is a dumpster fire of a property. Why on earth would anyone ever consider doing that? It's actually sold. And I feel sorry for the people who bought that. I don't know who bought it, obviously, because I just saw it listed sold a few months ago. But there are people out there that are not running the strata report via solicitors or through AI and learning this stuff. Do not buy these properties, because as soon as there's issues with them, you will not be able to sell it and make your money back. You're going to lose money on it. And I feel sorry for those guys, because that place is genuinely about to fall down.
Yeah, and look, I think that's one of the top lessons we've had on this podcast is do your due diligence. Run your strata, read your strata, run it through AI if you want it. Have at least a glance over it before and go through the solicitor. Because we visited a place a couple of months ago that we really liked and we wanted to put an offer on. They were going through, to court with the developer. And there was like cladding issues, waterproofing issues and stuff. And if they were to lose, there's like another $20,000 in special levy when it was already the top of our budget. We're like, no, that's not worth taking the risk. But yeah, definitely go through your due diligence and pest and building inspection.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. And, you can do your due diligence and there'll always be something that falls through the cracks. There is always going to be something.
Last question. What are some of the mistakes you've made and that you wish you had known about and that you want to warn our listeners? What are some of the steps they shouldn't avoid and make sure they go through?
Stop using Afterpay, Zip, Klarna. Just stop. Pay that off. Close the accounts. Just stop. Oh, and weirdly enough, in regards to debt owing, I just canceled my card on a gym membership, and like they sent me to a debt collector and everything. It didn't matter. The banks didn't care about that. I think the banks are aware that gyms are a bit predatory in that nature. So They didn't care about that. Thankfully, I was a little stressed about that because I was like, I haven't like touched this in about 3 years.
Oh, wow. Oh, yeah.
It's like
Was
I only owe
fine.
like $200 to the gym, but they text me every 3 days still to this day. I don't know, ridiculous. Anyway,
Change number.
so you don't worry about things like that where it's like, oh, you're subject to predatory behavior. But Afterpay and stuff like that, credit cards, get rid of them. It does not help you. Any debt available to you, even though you haven't spent that money that you don't have, the banks still take that into account. Even though I had Afterpay and Zip and they were totally paid off and their balance was zero, they looked at it and they said, oh, well, you can use $5,000 on Zip money and $5,000 on Afterpay. Therefore, that's going to be $30,000 taken off of your loan. Like,
Interesting.
don't let that happen to you. Just delete the accounts before you go to the bank. And thankfully, when we got pre-approved for our loan via the broker talked to the bank and the bank came back and said they need to close these accounts and then we can pre-approve them. So I don't know how many banks are going to be nice like that and actually come back and say, like, you need to do this in order to up the amount. But thankfully that happened to us. And so we were able to learn in that process. We have a Qantas frequent flyer points credit card that had a limit of 30,000. We just maxed the limit because we were like, at the time when we were renting, we just thought, look, we're never going to use the limit. But in case of an emergency, having that limit is like readily available could be quite helpful. We never spent that much. We never ever spent on the card what we had in our accounts and treated it more like a debit card than a credit card to get points. So then we can use it for flights and stuff. But when we went to the bank, they said, no, cancel the card or reduce the limit. Then you can get more borrowing power. So we reduced it to 15K, which is the minimum limit, by the way. But we used the credit card a lot to get points. So when that wasn't a sacrifice we only made, we didn't want to cancel it. So we still have that. But if you can cancel it and you can forego things like frequent flyer points, just get rid of it. You know, that 15K in credit card debt, in credit card limit that we had, still reduced the amount we could borrow by 30,000. No, sorry, not 30,000. It's triple that, $45,000.
Oh, wow. Yeah, so
it's a big deal.
Get the credit card, the frequent flyer after.
As soon as you get that home, you've signed the contract, you're paying your repayments.
Get it after.
You can get whatever loan you want after. If you get back on Afterpay or back on Zip, like who cares after that? You've got the loan. That's as long as you are repaying the bank and not missing a payment, the bank is not going to care. Though you should care if you go to refinance, you go to borrow for another property in the future, you then need to cancel those accounts again. But if you're in that kind of interim period where it doesn't really matter too much, go nuts.
Go for it, go nuts. But keep your repayment, yeah? Like don't go in the red.
Don't miss the repayments. And if you can pay more than minimum, please do. Pay weekly, don't pay monthly. You pay off your loan sooner. And
well, some banks don't allow that.
No, but
you can put in
want
the
to look
offsets.
for a loan where the early repayments are feeless.
Yeah.
Because then you can just chuck money onto the loan whenever you want. That was a criteria for us when we went to our mortgage broker. We said we want an offset account and we want no fees for extra repayments. And that's what we got.
I mean, you can always put it in the offset account. It does reduce your interest anyway.
Yeah. And so, any extra cash we have, we put it in the offset account. And, you know, it's already reduced the interest a lot, which has been great. But interestingly enough, if you put, say your repayments are $4,000 a month on a home loan, and you can put in an extra $3,000 a month into your offset account, then it would actually take you from 30 years down to 20 years to repay the loan. But if you use the offset account money to pay off the principal once it balances out, it reduces to 10 years.
Okay.
So, you know, there's so many different ways of going about this. You could choose to, instead of putting the offset account, I'm going to put it in the S&P 500, which historically year on year has had about an 8% return. And that'll outpace the interest that you pay on the loan. And then you might be able to pay it off in 9 years that way. Like there's
There's ways around it.
There's so many different ways of going about this.
And I think that deserves a podcast of its own.
It does, doesn't
Definitely. Jacob, any last word?
Ooh. I've got one little story actually where AI is really useful.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Go for it.
We were attending an auction and we thought we were completely prepared. And then I did deep research that morning to ask for advice on how to go about properly attending an auction, bidding, and not inflating it more than it needs to. And this was with Google Gemini. And with Google Gemini's research papers, you can actually turn it into a podcast. And so Katie and I, on the drive to the auction that we were planning on actually bidding on, we were listening to this podcast in the car that was AI generated. It's a great way to ingest information, by the way. And it told us like, considering you're a first home buyer, make sure that you talk to the agent and the vendor beforehand that you cannot put down a 10% deposit, which is, I think, the minimum for auctions. We only have 5%. And with auctions, as soon as that hammer goes down,
you need to pay.
You have to pay that 10%. And we did not have 10% because we were first home buyers. We had to, prior to the auction, organize it, signed, like written on paper saying via the vendor, yes, I'll accept 5%, not 10%. And so we were so close to putting ourselves in a position where we would have had to forego a break fee because we couldn't follow through with the auction because we didn't have that 10%. And we'll park in the car when we heard that to attend this auction. And we're like, oh my God, that could have been a disaster. That would have sucked so much. But, just
a lot of
AI can help a lot.
Yeah. And a lot of things to learn when you're going through that journey. Jacob, just before you go, you gave us a little gossip beforehand with the Strata people having to call the police.
Yeah.
Shoot us the goss.
Okay, so we attended an open house at Bidjigal Road in Arncliffe, and it was this block of units that had a lot of property for sale. And by the way, that's a red flag. If you see a building with a lot of property in it, it means there's something wrong and people are trying to dip. So you want to try and buy in places where there's sparsity in the amount of properties available. So we go and tend to the property and we're looking through and we're like, this is actually quite nice. Let's do some more research into it. We walked out into the lobby and someone who lived there walked in and I asked them, hey, we just looked at a property. Is there anything like we should know about before we put an offer in on this place? And that owner said, get out, don't touch this place. As you can see, like there's so many places for sale. Everyone is leaving because the strata is handled so poorly. We are $300,000 in debt. Every strata committee meeting, there are fights amongst the committee members. And the last committee meeting there was, police were called because a fight broke out, like an actual fist fight broke out in the committee meeting because they couldn't decide on how to handle the debt.
Oh God.
It was bad. And so as soon as I heard that, I'm like, yeah, no,
I'm out.
I'm not touching that strip of apartments at all. And another thing actually as well, while we're on topic of, finding things out, I found out a street that we're looking at buying on got flooded about 3 years ago and was like up to people's hips in water height on the street, right where there were car park entrances to these apartment blocks. I found it via an obscure Google deep research AI find. It linked me a Reddit video of this random person filming the floods on the street that we're looking at. And I'm like, there has been no record anywhere of anyone saying there were like flooding issues with buildings on that street. But this one obscure video that AI found determined that like, okay, there were floods here. Sorry, I just avoided that entirely. Like,
yeah. All right. So 2 things on this one. Talk about the property you want to buy to the neighbors. Let me
talk
do
to
that.
the neighbors. If you can see neighbors, talk to them, please.
Talk to the neighbors and check AI.
Yeah.
Jacob, on those words of wisdom, Thank you so much for joining us on the First Property Buyer Show today.
Thank you for having me.
That was the First Property Buyer Show, the show that is with you every step of the way during your property journey. I'm Emilie Lauer, and I will be back shortly with another episode. So thank you so much. Bye for now.
The information featured in this podcast is general in nature and does not take into consideration your financial situation or individual needs and should not be relied upon. Before making any investment, insurance, tax, property, or financial planning decision, you should consult a licensed professional who can advise whether your decision is appropriate for you. Guests appearing on this podcast may have a commercial relationship with the companies mentioned.